Okay, hi everybody. Thank you for tuning in to our first day of events for our first annual Power Week, virtual Power Week. Today's event is a United Students presentation, which is a civil rights coalition on campus, and it includes several focus groups and clubs that focus on activism and human rights. Some of them being women's empowerment, GSA, BSU, Amnesty International, and the African American Male Focus Group. My name is Minna, and I'm a leader in women's empowerment, and I am vice president of BSU, and I'm a junior. And now I'm going to be passing it on to Insha.
Hey everyone, my name is Insha Sayed and I'm a senior leader in women's empowerment this year. So a little background about what women's empowerment is. It's just basically a focus group that we have on campus, and we empower young women and men to just on their journey to growth, and just for them to reach their full potential, and just to have, and we're just sort of their backbone. So yeah, and I will be passing it on to Masuma.
Hi everyone, my name is Masuma. I'm a junior and I'm also a leader of women's empowerment. I'm excited for this week and I hope you guys are too. I'm passing it on to Carolina.
Hi, everybody. My name is Carolina Barajas. I am also one of the leaders of Women's Empowerment, and I really hope you guys enjoy this presentation and you guys get to learn a whole lot more. And I'm going to pass it on to Adriana.
Hi, I'm Adriana. I'm a sophomore. I am a leader of Women's Empowerment and a member of GSA. Now passing it on to Dana.
My name is Dana and I'm a junior. I'm also a leader of Women's Empowerment. I'm also the president of Amnesty International, which is an activism club at our campus, and I'm going to pass it over to Yasmin.
Hi, I'm Yasmin Samoy. I'm the Vice President and a junior of Washington, and I'm going to pass it on to Mehreen.
Hi everyone, I'm Mehreen and I'm a sophomore and Amnesty International Secretary, and I'm going to be passing it on to Kavya.
Hi everyone, my name is Kavya Jolly. I'm the treasurer of Amnesty International, and I'm a freshman, and I'm going to pass it on to Damaris.
Hi everyone, I'm Damaris. I'm a junior and I'm the president of BSU this year. And a little bit about BSU is it's an organization dedicated to encouraging cultural diversity at Washington, with special regards for African American students, but it's not exempt to African American students. And I'm going to be passing it on to Webb.
Hi guys, my name is Webb. I'm a senior at Washington, and I'm the president of the African American Male Focus Group. And I'm going to pass it on to my brother Caleb.
Okay, Caleb could not join, but we're just going to move on with the presentation. We have provided a bunch of informative slides and a few videos in between, and we hope you guys enjoy and hopefully learn something.
All right, just give it a second. Okay, so we're first going to focus on Black culture, and Black people have greatly impacted American culture, and it's something that we should be focusing on and constantly learning about, because a lot of Americans don't know the truth behind the history of Black culture and, Black people's contributions to society. So that's why we would like to shed light on that today and hopefully teach y'all some things by going over the many achievements and impacts of Black culture. So stay tuned. First, we're going to talk about stepping. So stepping has had a long tradition in African communities. It first began as a way for people to express themselves in their communities and has evolved into what we see today. And this all started back when drumming was outlawed for the African American slaves. And so they decided to replace their drums with their bodies. And now it incorporates slapping the arms, legs, and chest. And it also combines chanting, singing, and dancing to tell a story, but, overall honor their history. It's also become very popular among college fraternities and sororities, and it goes back as early as the 1940s and 1950s. And we actually have a video showcasing a college fraternity showing off their dance. And I'm going to go ahead and play that. Let me know if you guys can hear.
We can't hear it, Dana.
You can't hear it? Okay.
Maybe try muting yourself
Okay.
and then playing it.
Mr. Zamora, do you have any suggestions for the students right now? Because this did work last night. Is he here?
Wait, sorry, can you explain that again? So, okay, is this on Google Meets or Google? Okay, I don't have that option. All right. Okay, I'm clicking present and it just says your entire screen. There's no other option. Mm-mm. Mm. Okay, Minna, do you want to try sharing your screen and see what happens?
Yeah, sure, I can try that. One second. Okay, it didn't give me the option to share audio. Okay, presentation audio on. Let me know if you can hear the sound.
Yes.
You can hear it? Okay. Everyone can hear? Yes?
Yes.
Okay.
Accept.
Okay, so
Okay, guys,
that
sorry
was
for the
the
confusion,
video.
but I hope you guys enjoyed that. I'm going to pass it over to Mehreen.
Okay, thank you so much, Dana.
I'm so sorry.
Okay, so now we're going to move on to fashion. And there are so many ways that fashion has been impacted by Black culture. Streetwear, for example, is one of the most popular styles in fashion today, and it originated from Black culture. It started in the 70s in New York when hip hop was created, and with this new music genre came a new way of dressing. Oversized clothing, hoop earrings, and sneaker culture are all trends that can be traced back to Black communities. Just like streetwear, sneaker culture also began in the 1970s in America when sneakers went from just being sportswear to a form of cultural expression, and it became an established trend due to the rise of hip hop culture. And so now we're going to take a look at fashion in Black communities throughout the decades. And we're going to start with the 70s. And here we can see bell bottoms, which are actually coming back in style now. We see some fur coats, and we're beginning to see mini skirts. And in Black communities, natural hair or afros were symbols of African heritage and pride, and they were further popularized throughout the 70s. And now we have the 80s, and the 80s were all about rap music. While hip hop developed in New York City throughout the 70s, the mid 80s would become known as the golden age of rap. The most fashionable rappers of the era were known for thick chains, big shoulder jackets, and four-finger rings. And here in the pictures, we can see the bright colors and chunky jewelry, which are all trends that came from Black communities. And finally, we have the 90s, and it wasn't until the 90s that hip hop really went mainstream. Early 90s hip hop fashion was defined by big, bold colors such as animal prints, and sports team apparel would also become a big part of hip hop fashion during that era. And again, in the pictures, we can see patterns in very bold colors and chunky jewelry. And so over the decades, we have adopted many trends that have come from Black communities, and we should just take a moment to recognize and appreciate that. And now I'm going to pass it on to Yasmin.
So now I'm going to take a little detour and give you guys a little history lesson. So African American literature. The first published works of African American literature came about in the 18th century when the US was a fresh independent country, but people still owned slaves. African Americans sought to demonstrate in their writing the proposition all men are created equal don't apply to African Americans, even though it should. Slave narratives. Conditions of slavery produced a certain genre of writing known as slave narratives, which we use today when studying primary sources. Despite spending much of her life enslaved, Phyllis Wheatley was the first African American and the second woman to publish a book of poems. She composed a wide range of classical genres, and she was determined to show that a Black poet was just as capable of artistic expression as a white poet. Early 20th century. So after the Civil War ended, Reconstruction offered a brief rest from violence and racism. However, the rise of Jim Crow laws in the American South diminished hope for a better future. Black writers in the U.S. like Booker T. Washington and W.E.B. Du Bois wrote important essays concerning social mobility and access to employment and education, which have become widely used in tracing the literary and political histories of African American thinkers, which have greatly inspired us today. The Harlem Renaissance. So, the Harlem Renaissance is the name given to the cultural, social, and artistic explosion that took place in New York City's Harlem neighborhood during the 1920s. It was an important movement that kindled a new Black cultural identity. Some notable figures from this movement include Langston Hughes, Zora Neale Hurston, and John Toomer. So, what is the importance of studying African American literature? Well, during the 400 years since European colonization began in what would become the future USA, the dominant voice represented has generally been upper class whites. That does not mean that other voices were not present, but these voices often had a difficult time making themselves heard. And it's important to first understand that African American culture is not an addition to American culture, it is a part of it, and therefore has a large role in it as well. American society has been largely built on the stories and perspectives told behind white people instead of African Americans themselves. But in the end, it doesn't matter if you're white, brown, black, yellow, or red. If you're an American, African American literature is part of your part of your country's history and culture. And that's a fact whether you acknowledge it or not. Now I'm going to pass it on to Insha.
Hey guys, so these are some of the inventions that wouldn't be possible without Black women, and we're going to be listing 8, but there are many more, but just for the sake of time, we have 8 listed. So the first one is 3D movies, which was invented by Dr. Valerie Thomas. And just a little background about her, she was a physics inventor and a NASA data analyst, and she also created 3D movies. And the second invention that we have is GPS, and that was invented by Dr. Gladys West. A little background about her: she developed the mathematics behind the global positioning systems that we rely on every single day.
The next invention that would not exist without Black women is menstrual pads, and it was created by Mary Beatrice Kenner. She actually first created a sanitary belt, and she didn't profit anything off of that, so then she made the menstrual pads. Next is Madam C.J. Walker, and she created conditioner and hot comb, and she was also the first self-made African-American millionaire.
So the next woman we have is Mary Van Braun, who invented the home security system. Her invention was the first closed-circuit television security system and paved the way for modern home security systems that are used today. And next up, we have Sarah Boone, who invented the ironing boards. And she was an African-American dressmaker who invented the modern-day ironing board. When she applied for her patent, she wrote that the purpose of her invention was to produce a cheap, simple, convenient, and highly effective way that was particularly adapted to be used in ironing the sleeves and bodies of ladies' garments.
Okay, next we have. Wait, oops. Okay, next we have gifts, which were invented by Lisa Galopter. And voice control, which was invented by Dr. Marianne Croak. Next, we'll be talking about some Black LGBTQ icons. A very prominent one is Marsha P. Johnson. Marsha P. Johnson was a transgender LGBTQ+ rights activist. She was a prominent figure in the Stonewall riots. Johnson worked alongside Sylvia Rivera to establish STAR, Straight Transgender Action Revolutionaries, a group dedicated to helping homeless LGBTQ+ youth. And next is Bayard Rustin. Bayard Rustin was an LGBTQ+ and civil rights activist. He was a key advisor to Martin Luther King Jr. Rustin also was an organizer of the March on Washington and was later awarded the Presidential Medal of Freedom.
Okay, next we're going to be playing a video. It's on AAVE and AAL, and you are going to find out what those terms mean as soon as I play this video.
How often have you heard someone say, period, sis, or child? Probably a lot if you've been on the internet.
How do you say woo Chile?
You said what?
Woo Chile!
But how much do you know about the origin of those words?
Or when someone says like period, sis, whatever, snatch, all that. It's very much like internet culture.
There are actually examples of African American language, or AAL, which some of you may know as African American Vernacular English or African American English. AAL is a distinct English dialect some Black Americans speak within their communities. It's influenced and enriched other people in the U.S. and majorly contributed to pop culture.
Is the largest cultural capital that the United States has.
Hey fam, I'm Imayan, and today you'll be hearing me and not seeing me because this is an exploration of African American language, why it's been stigmatized, and the future of this Black dialect now that so many non-Black people use it. And no, we cannot promise you'll be any cooler after watching this. Social media's connectivity has made it so easy for very regional and culturally specific slang to become new buzzwords.
It's the smart for me. It's the brains for me. It's the knowledge for me.
It's the honesty and loyalty for me. It's that booty for me.
Hey, for all you white people that will not stop messaging me about AAVE, this is what I'm talking about. This is what I'm talking about. Don't do this.
Meet Tiana Nicole. She's a TikToker and makeup artist. Her videos educating people on what AAL is have been very popular online.
When it comes to AAVE, if you're a Black creator and you try to do that or you try to use that, people try to demonize you for it. try to say, oh, you're being aggressive, or why are you getting mad, or all the ways that if someone else used it, they're seen as cool.
Serving very much funeral home. Yes, ma'am.
Many non-Black content creators are using AAL in their tweets, captions, and videos to seem trendy or funny.
They're just thinking about how can I go viral or be cool off of saying something I heard another Black person say. I personally do not think non-Black people are grasping why it's not okay to use AAVE. And it's just another example of Black culture being used in a way it shouldn't, or not being respected the way it should. It's just another cycle repeating itself.
Before it engulfed TikTok, where did AAL come from? Some terms originated in the queer, Black, and Latinx communities.
No tea, no shade, no pink lemonade.
But AAL also has a deeper history. There are two main theories on how African American language was developed. One is the Anglicist hypothesis. It says the West Africans who were enslaved learned English the way European immigrants would have, through exposure to native English speakers. But this theory was challenged around the 1960s by researchers who pointed out those West Africans did not come to America by choice, and the conditions of slavery made it difficult for them to learn English like the Europeans. The second theory is the Creolist hypothesis. It argues early versions of AAL developed between two West African groups who didn't know each other's languages.
The argument then is that African American language descended from what we call a process of pidginization or creolization. Creole, then you start to think where Creole language is spoken that we know of, the Caribbean, and we start trying to make those links between what basically happens in the Atlantic, and that is Caribbean Creole languages as well, in contact or having similarities to African American languages today.
West Africans who were enslaved created their own lingo to communicate with each other. For example, using the word bogus to say something is fake is thought to have been derived from the African Hausa word boko, which means deceit or fraud. So when I say, it's bogus the dialect with such deep roots is appreciated, you understand exactly what I'm conveying.
Most African Americans that are in fact making it in our society have one language style for the dominant society, because we're not stupid. I mean, I think that's what we need to get away from. African Americans are not stupid.
Dr. Blake says racism is deeply embedded in the US. And so it's unsurprising that, like so many other contributions by Black people in this nation, the language they created is undervalued.
It's not only that the language is seen as negative or devalued, it's that the people are seen as negative and devalued. And that language then becomes a proxy for that stigmatization. So you can't outright say, I don't like you because you're Black, right? But you can say, I don't like your language, and therefore I won't hire you.
In 1979, Black parents at Martin Luther King Jr. Elementary School in Michigan sued the Ann Arbor School Board for discriminating against its 11 Black students and the way they spoke. Judge Charles Joyner ruled in favor of the parents.
So almost 20 years after the 1979 Ann Arbor decision, you have the Oakland School Board, which puts out a resolution that acknowledges that African American language, or African American English, is the language being brought to the school by young African American children. So then what happens, right?
Teaching African American students, quote, in their primary language. Isn't that inflammatory?
The 1996 Oakland School Board decision to acknowledge AAL led to a 6-month media storm discrediting it.
Graphic, Ebonics, it is absurd.
The dialect was dubbed Ebonics, a term that literally meant Black speech. The name was a combination of the words ebony for Black and phonics for sound. Nearly everyone, including Black figures like Jesse Jackson and Maya Angelou, was against what the California board was implementing. The decision even made it all the way to Congress.
The continued misunderstanding of African American English was that the media really simplified the issues, right? And the teaching of language arts is a complicated issue. What happens in school, you teach language, right? So, they want us to teach African American English. No, we want you to acknowledge African American English. And to acknowledge it means that you have to understand it. And to understand it, you have to do the work of understanding it.
In fact, one of the biggest misconceptions around AAL is this.
She here.
Right, she here.
Now, Ms. Von Cook, that's just bad English, isn't it? How can you say that's a language?
No, that's different English.
The grammar in AAL is different than many other dialects of American English, but similar rules can be found in Russian, Mandarin, and Arabic. So, African American language grammar structure is actually quite complex. Take this sentence. It's been a minute since I've seen her. Non-AAL speakers might assume this means I haven't seen her in exactly 1 minute. But in AAL, it means I haven't seen her in a really long time. Here's another one. I be going to the store. In white mainstream American English, this means I go to the store. But in AAL, we're using the habitual be, meaning I go to the store often. The way some words are pronounced is also an indicator of AAL. And like most languages, there are regional differences.
The other day I heard my daughter say, I'm finna go, right? And I was like, hey, how can you say that? You're from New York. And what you're starting to realize is through media, right? That African American English is starting to get smaller and smaller and smaller in terms of regions.
The lack of acknowledgement of AAL also has major consequences for Black people in the legal system. A study found less than 60% of African American English was transcribed accurately, and stenographers were unable to accurately paraphrase what they'd heard 77% of the time. Remember that 1996 Oakland case I mentioned earlier? It had lasting reverberations.
We had no idea that we would become the catalyst for raising the national debate about the education of African American children.
The Oakland School Board ended up publicly backing down on their initial claims, but continued teaching students how to translate AAL to standard English.
And here it's really poor young African American children. And the reason why I want to say that is because what you have is a case where oftentimes middle-class African American children can code switch.
And it's not just middle-class African American children.
I wanted to address the mandates I put in place restricting in-person dining and activities that require you to remove your mask. Shorty, pull your mask up, man. People dying, Shorty. Stand, hold tight for a second.
You can hear the change in how the Baltimore mayor addresses the press.
I wanted to address the mandates I put in place.
Compared to how he's speaking with someone in his community.
People dying, Shorty.
That's what we call code switching. It's going from one language to another or one dialect to another.
Nice to meet you.
So as a content creator on TikTok, it's unfortunately there are many ways that they try to put you in a box or put you under a certain trope. Of course, me with my personality, it's the sassy Black girl, or I could be the clapback girl, or I can be the super educator.
Nicole says mislabeling African American words and phrases simply as internet stan culture erases Black people from the expressive forms they've created in the US over centuries.
For the people that email me and text me and message me, can they say certain phrases? I always say, you know, you're asking how to use certain words and why can you or can't you use certain words, but you're not asking me how to make it better in my life as a Black person, and this is my culture that you're trying to use in the first place.
I'ma handle the language you hear on popular Netflix shows and TikTok is actually a representation and a way of living for so many Black Americans. It's history.
And there's something really beautiful about the expression of African American English by its speakers. It's alive. It is explicit. It's indirect. It has all of these wonderful aspects. And so it gets preserved just by being, just by living, just by experiencing, just by expressing who we are. And so it's inevitable. And, you know, I just think this is such a language that has so much life. And as long as there is life in us, it will continue to be produced.
Okay, so hopefully you enjoyed that video on AAVE and AAL. And hopefully you're more mindful if you do use these words.
Have you heard someone say
Sorry. If you do use these words, hopefully you're more mindful of the roots and where they came from. Here we have a list. See if you recognize any of these words. Maybe you use them. I know I do. I use some of these. And all of these came from Black people. So it's important to acknowledge that. So now we are going to be moving on to some important Black activists and figures.
So the first figure that we are going to be talking about is Kendrick Lamar. I'm sure most of you guys have heard of him. If you haven't, please go check him out. He's a great lyricist and a great artist. And he uses his music to express his beliefs on Black liberation. So in his album, specifically in To Pimp a Butterfly and Good Kid, Mad City, he talks about his experiences as a Black man, the evils of racism and capitalism, and how each one fuels the other, and growing up in Compton. He talks about his unapologetic Blackness on songs like Blacker the Berry, as well as the racist system that is America on Hood Politics. He urges other Black people to stop being caterpillars who pimp themselves for white people and instead become the butterflies they were destined to be. The next figure that we're going to talk about is Afeni Shakur, who was a political activist, and she was a former member of the Black Panther Party. The Black Panther Party is a group of people that started in Oakland who work towards Black liberation, and she was a member of the Panther 21, where her and 20 other Black Panthers were framed by the FBI and later acquitted about 2 years later. And Afeni Shakur was the only Panther who represented herself in court, and she did so while pregnant with her son. A lot of you may know her as the mother of Tupac Shakur, who I hope all of you guys know and are familiar with. And then I'm going to pass it on to Minna, who's going to talk about some more figures.
So next we have Amanda Gorman, who is a poet, author, activist, and her work focuses on issues of oppression, feminism, race, and marginalization, as well as the African diaspora. She is a cum laude graduate of Harvard University, where she studied sociology, and she was the youngest poet to ever read at a presidential inauguration, and she was chosen specifically by First Lady Jill Biden. And she's written for the New York Times, as well as being the first poet to ever perform at the Super Bowl this year. Next, we have Nzambi Mati, who is a Kenyan entrepreneur who discovered a way to recycle plastic waste into bricks that are 7 times stronger than concrete. She worked as a data analyst and oil industry engineer, and she later quit her job and created a small lab in her mother's backyard where she tested sand and plastic combinations after seeing a bunch of toxic waste on the streets of Nairobi. She received a scholarship to study in the material labs at the University of Colorado Boulder and developed a prototype for the machine that now produces the textured bricks. She founded Genje Makers, which transforms plastic waste into durable building materials, and her company generates between 1,000 and 1,500 bricks per day.
Okay, now we're going to be talking about African American athletes that have somehow impacted the Black athletic community. Okay, so our first athlete is Althea Gibson, and Althea Gibson was an African American tennis and golf player. She was one of the first Black athletes to cross the color line of international tennis. By 1958, she had won 56 international and national singles and doubles titles. Following her tennis career, she pursued her lifelong aspiration, singing. And after singing publicly, she was assigned to a record label and released 2 songs. She later became the first woman in history to receive the Theodore Roosevelt Award, which is the highest honor from the National Collegiate Athletic Association. To this day, her footsteps make a huge mark in not only the tennis world for Black people, but for all people. To see this powerful Black woman walk around and be one of the best while people try to demean her power is one of the greatest challenges Black women and men still face today. Her bravery opened up a whole new world for Black athletes, and her legacy lives not only on the court, but in our lives and speaks to the strength we have as a people. Our next athlete is Jesse Owens, and Jesse Owens was an American track and field athlete / four-time gold medalist in the 1936 Olympics. He specialized in sprints and the long jump and got his start at Ohio University. He's recognized in his lifetime as perhaps the greatest and most famous athlete in track and field history. After winning the Berlin Olympics and securing 4 gold medals, he seemingly crushed Hitler's myth of Aryan supremacy. And after winning the Olympics, Owens actually shook hands with Hitler, who gave him congratulations, while the President of the United States was too busy to even acknowledge him. And in Germany, he was allowed to stay at the same hotel as whites, while in America, those same racist ideals stayed and thrived. ESPN also ranked Owens the 6th greatest North American athlete of the 20th century. The award that bears his name is the USA Track and Field's highest accolade for that year's best track and field athlete. Despite his great name and impact on the track and field world, in America he was still treated as just another talented Black man. Regardless of the hardships, Owens thrived and lifted his name all over the world and continued to do so. It's people like him that remind us that just because we aren't acknowledged doesn't mean we aren't important. And now I'm going to pass it back to Minna.
Thank you, Damaris. And now I'm going to be talking about Serena Williams, who is a tennis player who revolutionized women's tennis with her powerful style of play. She's won 72 single tennis titles, 23 of them being Grand Slams, 23 doubles titles, 4 gold medals in 3 Olympic Games, and she has been the #1 in the Association of Tennis Professionals for 57 weeks. She and her sister Venus started playing tennis when they were 3 years old, and today they are 2 successful players and businesswomen. She speaks out on many issues regarding racism, sexism, body image, and more, all of which she has experienced herself. Next, we have Colin Kaepernick, who was a professional football quarterback, formerly for the San Francisco 49ers, who is now an activist. He played 6 seasons for the 49ers, and in 2016, he gained national attention when he began protesting racial oppression by not standing when the United States national anthem started playing at the games. And as you can see here, this is the actual photo of him kneeling during the national anthem. And his protests were eventually copied by hundreds of professional and amateur athletes across the nation. In March 2017, with the last year of his contract remaining, Kaepernick announced his decision to opt out of his contract and enter free agency, and he has not played for the NFL since. Now we have some speeches that were given by Caleb and Awab from the African American Male Focus Group.
You see, a lot of people get the word revolution mixed up, and they think that revolution is a bad word. Revolution is nothing but like having a sore on your body, and then you put something on that sore to cure that infection. I'm telling you that we're living in an infectious society right now. I'm telling you that we're living in a sick society, and anybody that endorses integrating into this sick society before it is cleaned up is a man who's committing a crime against his people. If you walk past a hospital room and see a sign that says contaminated, and then you try to lead people into that room, those people are mighty dumb, you understand me? Because if they weren't, they would tell you that you were an unfair, unjust leader who does not have your followers' interest in mind. And what we're saying is that leaders have got to become. We've got to start making them more accountable for what they do. They're going around talking about so-and-sos and Uncle Toms. So we're going to open a culture center and teach them what blackness is. And these Negroes are more aware than you and me and Malcolm and Martin Luther King and everybody else put together. That's right. They're the ones that are most aware. They're most aware because they're the ones that are going to open up the center. They're going to tell you where bones come from in Africa that you can't even pronounce the names of. That's right. They'll be telling you about Chaka, the leader of the Bantu freedom fighters, and Jomo Kenyatta, those dingo dingas. They'll be running all of that down to you. They know about it all. But the point is, they do what they're doing because it is beneficial and it is profitable for them. We've got to face some facts, that the masses are poor, that the masses belong to what you call the lower class. And when I talk about the masses, I'm talking about the white masses, I'm talking about the black masses, and the brown masses, and the yellow masses too. We got to face the fact that some people say you fight fire best with fire. But we say you put out fire best with water. We say you don't fight racism with racism. We're going to fight racism with solidarity. We say you don't fight racist capitalists with black capitalists, you fight racist capitalists with socialism. A lot of us running around talking about politics don't even know what politics are. Do you ever see something and pull it and you take it as far as you can and it almost outstretches itself and it goes into something else? If you take it so far that it becomes two different things, as a matter of fact, some things, if you stretch it so far, it'll be another thing. Do you ever cook something for so long that it turns into something else? Isn't that right? That's what we're talking about with politics. That politics aren't anything. But if you stretch it so long that it can't go any further, then you know what you got on your hands? You got an antagonist contradiction. And when you take that contradiction to the highest level and stretch it out as far as you can stretch it, you get what you call war. Politics is war without bloodshed, and war is politics with bloodshed. If you don't understand that, you can be a Democrat, you can be a Republican, and you can be independent. You can be anything you want to. You ain't nothing at all.
Before we try and explain what is meant by the ballot or the bullet, I would like to clarify something concerning myself. I'm still a Muslim. My religion is still Islam. That's my personal belief. Just as Dr. Martin Luther King is a Christian minister down in Atlanta, Georgia, who heads another organization fighting for the civil rights of black people in this country. Although I'm still a Muslim, I'm not here tonight to discuss my religion. I'm not here to try and change a religion. I'm not here to argue or discuss anything that we differ about, because it's time for us to submerge our differences and realize that it is best for us to first see that we have the same problem, a common problem. A problem that will make you catch hell whether you're a Baptist or a Methodist or a Muslim or a nationalist. Whether you're educated or illiterate, whether you live on the boulevard or in the alley. You're going to catch hell just like I am. We're all in the same boat and we're all going to catch the same hell from the same man. All of us have suffered here, in this country, political oppression at the hands of the white man, economic exploitation, and social degradation. Now, in speaking like this, it doesn't mean that we're anti-white, but it does mean we're anti-exploitation, we're anti-degradation, and we're anti-oppression. Whether we are Christians or Muslims or nationalists or agnostics or atheists, we must first learn to forget our differences. If we have differences, let us differ in the closet. When we come out in front, let us not have anything to argue about until we get finished arguing with the man. If the late President Kennedy could get together with Khrushchev and exchange some wheat, we certainly have more in common with each other than Kennedy and Khrushchev had with each other. If we don't do something real soon, I think you'll have to agree that we're going to be forced to either use the ballot or the bullet. It's one or the other in 1964. It isn't that time is running out. Time is run out. I'm not a politician. I'm not even a student of politics. In fact, I'm not a student of much of anything. I'm not a Democrat. I'm not a Republican. Well, I am one who doesn't believe in deluding myself. I'm not going to sit at your table and watch you eat with nothing on my plate and call myself a diner. Sitting at the table doesn't make you a diner unless you eat some of what's on the plate. Being here in America doesn't make you an American. Being born here in America doesn't make you an American. Why? If birth made you an American, you wouldn't need any legislation. You wouldn't need any amendments to the Constitution. You wouldn't be faced with civil rights filibustering in Washington, D.C. right now. They don't have to pass civil rights legislation to make a Pollack an American. These senators and congressmen actually violate the constitutional amendments that guarantee the people of that particular state or country the right to vote. And the Constitution itself has within it the machinery to expel any representative from a state where the voting rights of the people are violated. You don't even need new legislation. Any person in Congress right now who is there from a state or a district where the voting rights of people are being violated, that particular person should be expelled from Congress. And when you expel them, you've removed one of the obstacles in the path of any real meaningful legislation in this country. In fact, when you expel them, you don't need new legislation because they will be replaced by black representatives from counties and districts where the black man is in the majority, not in the minority. I say again, I'm not anti-Democrat, I'm not anti-Republican, I'm not anti-anything. I'm just questioning their sincerity and some of the strategy that they've been using on our people by promising them promises they don't intend to keep. To those of us whose philosophy is black nationalism, the only way you can get involved in the civil rights struggle is give it a new interpretation. Not only did we give our free labor, we gave our blood. Every time he had a call to arms, we were the first ones in uniform. We died on every battlefield the white man had. We have made a greater sacrifice than anybody who's standing up in America today. We have made a greater contribution and have collected less. I might stop right here to point out one thing. Whenever you're going after something that belongs to you, anyone who's depriving you of that right to have it is a criminal. Understand that. Whenever you are going after something that is yours, you are within your legal rights to lay claim to it. And anyone who puts forth any effort to deprive you of that which is yours is breaking the law is a criminal. We'll work with anybody, anywhere, anytime, who is genuinely interested in tackling the problem head on, non-violently, as long as the enemy is non-violent. We'll work with you on the voter registration drive. We'll work with you on rent strikes. We'll work with you on school boycotts.
Okay, thank you to Awab and Kayla for presenting those speeches. And that is the last of the event. Now we have a confirmation ticket. So to all the viewers, if you want to take a screenshot of this, you can send this into the Google form. Teachers are offering extra credit, or if you want Spirit Week points. So I'll leave this up for a bit to allow you guys to take a screenshot. And I hope you guys enjoyed the event and learned something. We've been working really hard on Power Week, and we hope you continue coming to the rest of the events. Tomorrow we have a Black Alumni panel at 3 p.m. and the flyer should be on the Husky Country Instagram. It should be on the slideshow on your Google Classrooms for your history classes, and it should also be on the Washington website. So there's a bunch of places you can find it, and it has the link, it has the flyers, it has everything. So yeah, again, thank you all for tuning in, and hopefully everyone's done taking screenshots for now, and I'm gonna stop sharing my screen. Okay, yeah, so thank you everyone for tuning in.